to talk with our design team in regards to some decisions, some input that we have received from this group, as well as the broader community in regards to design elements of recognition on this project. Thank you, Natalie. I appreciate you. Next slide. And the next slide. We are going to have some exciting updates in regards to our Community Oversight Advisory Committee and the wonderful things that they're doing there in regards to our work with the CMGC and our DBE and mini CMGC program. We are going to talk a bit about the design equity framework and the great work that the project team is doing in regards to weaving equity throughout the entire project. And that will be our meeting for today. Next slide, please. You all are familiar with these. We haven't been together in a month, but we have in person, which is great. You all know that I want to hear from you. Your voice matters. It is our collective brain trust that helps to move this project forward. And I always expect you all and trust that you will come into the meeting authentic and genuine and speak from your heart in regards to your expertise and your love for the community. We ask you to listen for understanding. There's a lot of information today. Often we are dealing with very sensitive and passionate issues. So we ask you to deal with issues and not people. Oftentimes that can cause us to experience some discomfort, but we rarely grow when we are comfortable. So we ask you to experience it, take it in, remain respectfully engaged. If you can, HAAB members, please keep your camera on. We'd love to create as much of an interactive space as we can. And then again, as I always state, we cannot heal and correct everything in the community today, but we are taking strides each time that we gather together to move the needle forward as it relates to this project. So we appreciate you being in the space with us. Next slide, please. At this time, I am excited because we have some public commenters. We haven't had any for a while, for some time. So I am going to turn it over to my capable colleagues, and they are going to help us facilitate the public comment period.
Thank you, Erica. I will just go ahead and go through the instructions. We're inviting members of the public viewing the meeting on the live stream to make verbal public comment by phone at this time. If you wish to do so, please dial the phone number shown on the screen here and enter the meeting ID and passcode when prompted. After doing so, you'll be placed in a virtual waiting room until your turn to speak. And then when the time comes, we'll invite you to unmute yourself and speak your comment. Speakers will have up to 2 minutes for their comment, and we'll have an on-screen timer with the countdown, and they will be muted at time. If you'd like to provide more extensive comments to members of the Historic Albina Advisory Board, please see the options listed on the meeting agenda. And in addition to any verbal comments we hear today, 4 written comments were shared with the HAAB in advance of today's meeting. And if you're joining us on the live stream, please remember to mute your speakers to minimize feedback. And with that, I'm going to check to see who we have in the waiting room. And I'm going to admit our first public commenter. And this is, let's see, they just disappeared from my view. It's a phone number ending in 6187. Going to invite you to make your comment at this time. Looks like you are muted. You may have to dial *6 to unmute yourself on your phone. Phone number ending in 6187. I think you are still muted. So please, even if you're unmuted on your phone, you may have to dial *6 to unmute yourself.
Hello. This is Catherine Doherty Chapman from the Portland Bureau of Transportation. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here and for inviting me, Natalie, to just briefly share a project announcement. We are starting to have a conversation about a new type of parking permit program in the Elliott neighborhood, and we are recruiting people to be on a task force. And so I wanted to make sure that everybody here was aware of that and could share the word with their friends, neighbors, colleagues, what have you. So we actually just extended the deadline to this Sunday, and I've shared with you the information, and I have an updated flyer that I just sent to Natalie, and this will be a new type of parking permit program where we get to try new and different things that we haven't done before. And that is all I'll say. Thank you for listening and for spreading the word, and I can share my contact information if people have questions. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that information. I appreciate you coming to the meeting to verbalize that as well. And HAAB members did receive that in their email in advance of today's meeting. We have another person wishing to make a comment. I'm not able to see their phone number. They are, but if you, looks like they have their phone or their hand raised rather. So public comment.
Hi, this is Dean. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, we can.
Yes. Hi. I'm sorry. Kind of confusing here. Good afternoon. Thank you for an opportunity to speak to you. My name is Dean Sir, and I'm president of the Vote Before Tolls Committee. And I'm pleased to see there's increasing approval of the current design. And you all have been on a long journey, and I look forward to seeing that continue to progress. However, we're not convinced that there's a regional acceptance of the funding proposal. You'll see in a few slides that only $500 million, that's B with a billion with a B, of this project was funded by House Bill 2017. That's less than half of the $1.2 billion plus cost of the project as currently proposed. Tolling is coming. It was authorized in 2017 as congestion and environmental-based tolling, not for capacity or improvements. It was expanded last summer, 2021, is now being assumed to be a new source of revenue for ODOT. Toll is equal to a new tax. It's in addition to our current gasoline tax. Oregon was the first state in the nation to have a gasoline tax. And ODOT is working on a new mileage tax where we'll pay by the mile. IP4, Vote Before Tolls, is a grassroots citizens initiative targeting the 2024 ballot. It requires a regional vote before any new tolls. It's retroactive to 2018, which means it will cover I-5 Rose Quarter tolls, I-205 Oregon City tolls, which will be the first tolls in the Portland metro area, and even the forthcoming interstate bridge tolls. And it will also cover any other tolls proposed as part of ODOT's expanded study of the entire Portland metro area as authorized by the state legislature. It also covers all public agencies, including not just ODOT, but the City of Portland. They have a special exemption to be able to toll within the city boundaries. It covers all forms of tolls, vehicles and bicycles. Some of our bicycle bypasses are very expensive, and they're going to need to be funded. Signature gathering will resume late next month, and we encourage those that have questions or want to sign up for updates to visit us at votebeforetolls.org, votebeforetolls.org. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I appreciate that. We have one more person wishing to make a comment in our waiting room, so I will go ahead and admit them. And I think they may have joined us. It is the phone number ending in 5311. We invite you to unmute yourself by dialing *6 and speak your comment. Again, this is phone number ending. Oh, did they leave us? No. Phone number ending in 5311.
Hello.
Hi, we can hear you.
Oh, this is Shane Whittington at ODOT.
Oh, hi, Shane.
Hey.
This is a member of the project team. Apologies, we did not recognize you, your phone number. So that is all the comment we have.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the commenters that did come. I want to reiterate to HAAB members that you all did receive a copy of the flyer in regards to the first public commenters information. So check your inbox for that. And you can avail yourself, please, to your networks and to yourself about folks who might want to participate in that important project. Miss Natalie, can we go back to the slides, please? Awesome. With that, I'd like to invite Monica and Monica Blanchard and Mike Baker to help me provide project updates for this meeting.
Great, looks like I'm up first. Good afternoon, HAAB members. I'm not sure I've had a chance to meet many of you at this point. My name is Mike Baker, and I'm the project manager for ODOT's Owners Representative Team. We've been on the project for almost 4 years, helping ODOT plan for and move the project forward. One of our duties right now is to help ODOT develop a Reconnecting Communities grant application. This is a pilot grant program issued by the federal government through the U.S. Department of Transportation. It was authorized under the recent Biden infrastructure bill. And what's relatively unique about it is its focus not solely on congestion relief or typical aspects of transportation projects, but on the community reconnection opportunities that a project like Rose Quarter brings through the development of a highway cover. And we're showcasing the highway cover as the central feature of our grant application in hopes that we receive a large award under this grant program. We're applying for a capital construction grant, and through development of the highway cover, really the focus is to create space that eventually we will create place on top of. We're doing this grant application in partnership with the City of Portland and in close collaboration with Albina Vision Trust, as well as members of our owner rep team and broader ODOT team. In parallel to ODOT's application for a capital construction grant under the same program, the city and AVT are partnering to develop a planning grant application that would help envision within the broad community the use of that space in creating place and how to connect the community on either side of I-5 through the use of the covers. Our grant application is due on October 13th. I really appreciate all of the partnership to date with the city, with AVT, with some of our strategic advisors like Erica and Dr. Holt and Janelle, who have really provided a lot of insight to our grant. If we win an award under this grant program, one of the additional benefits is that we are deemed as a highly rated project in the eyes of the federal government, which means when we go to apply for future other funding under other federal grant programs, we move toward the front of the line because we've already been deemed highly rated coming out of the Reconnecting Communities grant. So we want to get as large an award as possible, but mostly we want to be able to move to the front of the line when we compete under even larger grant programs like Infra, Mega, and RAISE grants. One of the ways that we can compete the best and show the strongest against other projects around the US is to have as broad a range of support as possible. And we are asking for support of the HAAB as well as the COAC in providing a letter of support. And I'm not sure, Eric, is it you or Amy perhaps are going to show a possibility of that tonight. So I'm happy to answer any questions or pass it back to you, Erica.
Any questions for Mike in regards to the Reconnecting Communities grant? I won't be sharing publicly the letter, but I have worked with the team to draft some language and we'll be circulating to the HAAB for your input, for your edits, for your approval directly following this meeting. So it's a really exciting time to be partnering again with the city and AVT and moving the work forward, hearing and elevating the voice of the community. So any hands or questions in regards to the Reconnecting Communities grant? Seeing none, Ms.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
Thanks, Erica. Good evening, HAAB members. Monica Blanchard. I am the Deputy Project Director, helping cover for Megan tonight as she's out with Mike. And so on a couple slides here, really focusing on schedule and some of our main activities that our team has been doing over the last couple months. So first here on the supplemental environmental assessment process, our team has been doing a lot of work over the last several months on this draft supplemental environmental assessment as we really get it ready to finalize for the public review period. So the team is on track to publish the draft document right now at the end of October, and that will really kick off a 30-day review period where we'll be hosting an online open house, a public hearing, and other opportunities for the public and other partner agencies to provide comments on this supplemental environmental assessment document. We haven't set the official publishing date yet, but I did want to mention as we get closer to setting that date, we'll be working with Erica to reach out to all of you with more information on how you can access the document and how you can share that with your networks to provide comment if you would like to. And then as shown on this graphic here, after the comment period, we'll address any of those comments, make any necessary revisions, and we are still on track to have that revised NEPA decision the first quarter of 2023. So then on the next slide, this overall schedule graphic you've seen before, but wanted to show it again today. That first red checkered bar pulls in the schedule for the environmental review from the previous slide. And then for designs for early work packages A, B, and C, those are continuing to progress. We have a 30% design package for package C that's getting submitted from our design team at the end of the month. And then for packages A and B, those will be hitting the 90% design milestone here this fall and towards the end of the year. So with that, we're still on track to go to construction for early work packages A and B, as you can see on here at the end of 2023. So that's exciting, and we're working towards that milestone still. And since we last met, the city staff has rejoined the project, and really their engagement has been instrumental in moving forward with the environmental review process, as well as a lot of the design work on the early work packages and really diving into some of those details on the main construction package. So I am joined tonight by PBOT's project manager, Sharon Dalio. So I will turn it over to her for just a couple quick comments.
Great, thanks, Monica. And hello, everybody. So like Monica said, I'm the city's project manager. I'm with PBOT's Major Projects and Partnerships Group. I wanted to just say that the city is just really happy to be back on the project and here today. We are looking to engage more with the HAAB and looking forward to understanding the work that you all have been doing to date. City leadership and PBOT have followed the setup of this committee, and we recognize your involvement in getting to where we are with Hybrid 3, and we appreciate your consideration and the input that you've all provided. Our team is still getting up to speed with traffic analysis and working to explore design solutions that will maximize the community benefit. And we're here to listen. A focus of ours is to ensure that city priorities around what the covers can provide. That's a top priority of ours, top area of focus. And like you heard Mike say, PBOT, Prosper, and other bureaus are working with ABT as well. And I think that's everything I wanted to say, but thank you again for being here, and I appreciate the opportunity to listen.
Thank you, Sharon. We appreciate you joining. It is an exciting time to have this collaborative work with the city and with AVT. Were there any questions for Monica or Sharon before we move forward? I see no hands, so thank you, ladies, for sharing. I appreciate you being in the meeting with us. As we move forward, Miss Natalie, if you would share the slides once again. Thank you so much. I'd like to introduce colleague Monica Johnson with Espousal Strategies, who will share an update of what the Community Oversight Advisory Committee has been up to.
Good afternoon, COAC members. My name is Monica Johnson, and this is my first time speaking in front of you, so thank you for allowing me to join. I am going to give you an update on what the court spoke about at our September 15th meeting. So we met September 15th after taking a break during the summer. The COAC was updated about the contract awards for the early work packages A and B. The COAC provided some feedback to project leadership, saying that they would like to focus on creating job opportunities for the Black community with the project. They would also like to focus on growing DBEs to ensure that work on the I-5 Roseporter project will lead to other work on upcoming regional projects. And they also encouraged the project leadership to invite additional stakeholders to the table, such as Emmanuel Hospital, the Motor Center, and also faith-based organizations. So that is what we covered at the meeting on the 15th. Also joining me is Bill Bruce with the CMGC, if you have any questions about the early work packages. Thank you.
Monica, thank you. Bill, I appreciate you for joining us. HAAB members, are there any questions for Monica or Bill? I think it's an exciting time. I joined that COAC meeting, and there was some great news about the mini CMGCs. Mr. Edwards, I see your hand.
Were the minutes of those meetings distributed? The 17th and 15th meeting, yes.
We have not distributed the minutes yet. I can send them to Erica once they are approved, and she can distribute them to HAAB.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Dr. Richard, I see your hand.
Thank you so much, my great colleague. Just wanted to ask a question about the context of the discussion around the need to add more stakeholders to the table.
Bill, would you like to address that? Oh, sorry.
No, that's all right.
Sure, I'm happy to expand on that. It was Mr. Posey gave most of that comment, and I think what he was trying to channel is for a project with this footprint and magnitude that you would want to have the voice of those entities who are immediately impacted by the actual work involved. He asked that for a number, he had a list of entities he thought would be important for the COAC to have interaction with: the Moda Center, Legacy, Emmanuel, Albina Vision. And I think it was, I won't presume exactly what he was wanting out of those entities, but my understanding was that it would be those immediately affected by actual construction work and phasing. Does that answer your question?
Yes and no. The no is I'm still trying to understand the purpose of the value add, because at the end, I think there's been a lot of discussion about how this project would benefit, going to be impact with the construction of this project, i.e. Harriet Tubman School. But I think I would want more context to really understand, and I don't know if there's a way to have a discussion with James Posey to understand the purpose.
Dr. Richard, I will chime in and
really what I'm after is
we're losing you just a bit, but I will just chime in and say we are in the planning for how we bring the COAC and the HAAB back together, where we have opportunity for direct collaboration. I think for both committees, we want to make sure that there is broad representation of the community, and that there are voices from organizations like Bill mentioned, as well as other CBOs in the area who may have direct impact. Those who are directly working with entrepreneurs and trades and labor. There's a lot of great work going on with the CMGC team in regards to outreach and building the labor pool. And so I think all of our desire for both the COAC and for the HAAB is to make sure that we are including all of the necessary voices to create broad representation of the Black community. And so I will be updating this group as we coordinate a time. We are even looking to potentially in October having a time where these two groups can come together. And so you'll have an opportunity to interact directly with Mr. Posey.
Thank you so much. And it's just not Mr. Posey. I mean, I think it's the whole team, because your point exactly, Erica. I think I want to make sure that I either have alignment or understanding of what another aspect of the community is proposed. And so thank you very much. And I look forward to that combined meeting.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Monica and Bill, thank you so much for being with us and providing an update for us. With that, we're going to have some information from my colleague, Amy Ruiz, with Strategy 360 in regards to the public poll results.
Good evening. Thank you all so much. My name is Amy Ruiz. I am been working with this project for, I think, almost 2 years now through Strategy 360. My primary role is working on communications and government affairs. My colleagues are the pollsters. So they do opinion research and did this poll with input from our broader project team. So I'm here to present tonight, but that's all to say that I am not actually a pollster. So I can share these great results with you, but there might be some more technical questions. If you have any technical questions, I may need to take those back to our research team and get back to you, but I'm excited to share these findings with you all tonight. So next slide. So we undertook a survey 2 years ago, actually. There was one in September of 2020, and you'll see throughout this presentation, there are some questions that we asked again this year. So this year, the survey was conducted in June, and we interviewed, it was done online, so folks were specifically chosen from public records to get an adequate sample to represent the entire 3-county region. And those folks who were part of that sample received a link to take the survey online. 624 interviews were conducted, which means we have a margin of error here of about 3.9%. Next slide. So in the interest of time, we took out the executive summary from this slide deck. It is on the project website. So as we're going through all of this, if you want to go back to any of this information or look at the executive summary of this information, that's all on the project site. Next slide. So we asked, broadly speaking, we wanted to get a snapshot of folks' opinion on just issues in general. So this is a question that we asked in 2020 and again today, really asking folks, beyond COVID-19, what would you say are the most important issues facing the Portland metro area today? And respondents were able to choose 2. So we see the answers in blue are the answers from 2022. So housing and crime have popped to the top of people's minds. Whereas in 2020, we saw economy and jobs, social justice issues, and housing as the top issues. Keeping in mind that survey was conducted just a few months after the murder of George Floyd, when we were still experiencing social justice, racial justice protests in Portland on a daily basis. Next slide. We also wanted to gauge, how familiar are folks with the Rose Quarter project area? So we asked both that question, how familiar are you with the area? And also, how often do you drive, walk, bike, or use public transportation through the Rose Quarter? So about 49% of folks taking the survey travel through the Rose Quarter area often, and the other half travel through the Rose Quarter area a few times a year or never. You do see here on the right, we broke these responses down by different demographic groups, from ages, race, household income, which county they live in. And then we also have down here base and persuadable. Basically means, do they support the project, or maybe they're a little bit back and forth on whether they support the project. And you see here, most folks who do travel through the area, they're traveling through a few times per month or perhaps a few times per week. Next slide. And for the folks who do travel through the area, most are traveling through the area by car, while 1 in 5 tend to use public transportation. Next slide. This was, again, it was online, so there was a visual component to this survey. Folks were shown this map of the area to ask if they were familiar with the project area. You see in 2020, 82% in total were familiar with the area, a little bit less so this year, probably because many of us have been not traveling around town as much as we did. Next slide. Despite those fluctuations in familiarity with the area, the perceived importance of a project to address traffic remains steady. So we asked, how important is it to undertake a project to address congestion and traffic in this area? We see here in 2022, 41% say it's very important, and another 45% say it's somewhat important. So a total of 86% of respondents, when shown that Rose Quarter area, say it's very important, somewhat important to address this project. Next slide. And then nearly a third say that traffic has gotten worse, and a majority believe it will continue to get worse in the next year. And we did ask folks to, compare it to before the pandemic. So is it about the same? Is it worse? Is it better? We see a lot of folks saying it's about the same or worse, and expecting it to get further worse. Next slide. So this is a question where we were asking folks, how safe do you feel when driving on I-5 through the Rose Quarter area? The initial perception of safety, folks who answer that first question, about 61% total say they feel somewhat or very safe driving through the area. Then we later in the survey, after sharing more information about what this project would do, we came back to that question. Once these improvements are made, how safe do you think you will feel driving on I-5? And we see that sense of safety goes up once folks hear about the auxiliary lanes, the widened shoulders, and the other improvements through the project. Next slide. So then we got into some of the project specifics, explaining what this project aims to do and what some of the components are for it. Next slide. So we asked, and again, this is online, as we are going to pause to read the entire thing, but we essentially described, here's what the project's going to do. We're going to address traffic and congestion and safety on I-5, new ramp-to-ramp lanes, full shoulders, improvements to local streets, new and wider sidewalks, improvements for people walking, rolling, and biking, connections across I-5 for people, including a new highway cover with new lands. Overall support, when they heard that description, 77%. We did ask a similar question in 2020, keeping in mind that was before the cover decision was made. So there was a little bit different information in terms of exactly what the project looked like, but the opening support in 2020 was 61. And with this set of information is 77%. Next slide. So we recognize there are people with a lot of varieties of opinions about the project, folks who are very supportive of the project for all the different benefits it could bring, and folks who have concerns or questions or criticisms of the project. Again, this is very small print down here, but we took our best effort, our fairest effort at putting those together into 2 statements. So here's something supporters of this project may say, here's something opponents of this project may say, to gauge whether that changed folks' opinion. And we do see support softened a bit here, went down by about 7 points overall. And then next slide, we went into some of the various project elements. So after, and we'll cover this ground in just a moment, after talking to folks about specific project elements, we asked again at the end, now that you've learned even more about this project, Do you generally support or oppose it? And we see that support went right back up to 77%, including a third of folks, 30% of folks who felt very supportive of this project. Next slide. So project components, next slide. So in 2020, we actually asked quite a bit about what the cover could look like, including what kind of programming could happen on that. And that was information that HAAB and other groups and individuals used to help shape what it looks like today. With that recommendation behind us, we focused in more on some of the other elements of the project. We shared information about building full shoulders, building ramp-to-ramp auxiliary lanes, creating new pedestrian and bike facilities, building a cover over I-5 to provide that additional space, and then relocating the I-5 southbound ramp. And next slide. And we asked folks, regardless about how you feel about the project, please indicate whether you believe that each one is a very good idea, a bad idea, or a very bad idea. You see here shoulders and auxiliary lanes, well over 80% of folks believing that those are very good or good ideas. But all of these are above majority, feeling that they are good ideas. So we see a lot of support for the highway cover, a lot of support for those new bike and pedestrian paths, and even additional support for the ramp relocation. Next slide. When asked to pick just one, if folks could only have one of those project components, which would they feel is most important? Auxiliary lanes, by quite a wide margin, was noted as the most important. Next slide. So we also wanted to share more information about auxiliary lanes. We know it's not necessarily something that people just know when you say the word auxiliary lane. What do we mean by that? So we wanted to be sure that folks do understand what they are, what they look like, what purpose they serve. So we explain that they're ramp-to-ramp lanes that connect the highway on and off ramps so drivers can enter and exit the highway without merging into through traffic. Explaining a little bit more about how those could be used if they're built on land primarily owned by ODOT. We asked you how likely, knowing that this is a benefit of auxiliary lanes as opposed to adding new through lanes, how likely are you to support the project? And we see 78% support, including 32% strong support. Next slide. We also shared more information about the highway cover and the impact. So explained, it's a concrete and steel platform that will span the street and create more usable area around the street where there's no land today. It'll reconnect the street grid and provide developable space for buildings and create a more continuous neighborhood, including creating opportunities for community spaces. So based on that information, we were asking, do you believe a highway cover will impact the communities surrounding the Rose Quarter, positively or negatively? And by and large, folks feel that that's going to be a positive impact on the community. Next slide. We also asked about the project's various goals. I'll show those to you here on the next slide. So again, they were shown these statements. This was done online. So we had 7 statements here about goals of the project, from mobility focus to improve safety, manage congestion, and improve travel time reliability. Transparency, which is about making decisions in an open, inclusive way. Greenhouse gas emissions. So Rose Quarter is part of a statewide plan to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. Rebuilding and strengthening a sense of community in the historic Albina and Rose Quarter areas. Expanding new job opportunities for DBE and a diverse workforce. And then supporting local businesses and those looking for work by investing in development opportunities. And finally, acknowledging current and historic harm done to Portland's Black community by centering the project on Black voices and working collaboratively with the HAAB and other partners to create a rejuvenated and reconnected neighborhood. Next slide. So we ask, after reading each one of these, please indicate how important that goal is in your opinion. So folks are able to gauge each one of these individually. You see over here on the right, every single one of these messages has well over 2/3 of folks saying this is a very important or somewhat important goal. We do see that the mobility focus, it was actually the #1 in terms of the most people saying it was very or somewhat important, really across demographic groups. The only demographic group that chose a different one as their top goal was people under the age of 35, actually named transparency, the how decisions are being made, as the most important of these goals. But these were all strong across the board, with that mobility focus really being the piece that connects the most people. Next slide. That's it for the presentation, but happy to bounce back to any slides or answer any other questions.
Are there questions from any HAAB members in regards to the poll results? Any questions for Amy?
And I will put the link to the full deck. There's also a memo. It's like a one-page explainer of some of the highlights of the poll, and I will put the link to both in the chat.
I have a question.
Yes, sir. Mr. Washington.
Good afternoon, everyone. You know, as I was listening to this, you know, it just keeps bouncing back into my mind is that there's never the conversation about how do we support people in acquiring asset within the space and talk about those things. I mean, there's that conversation of upward mobility, but the question still remains is how? And is there any real parts that you can talk about in this survey that helps people understand how they can gain land acquisition or how ODOT could support them in acquiring properties, those kinds of things? Is there any kind of thing like that for the public to know about?
Not from this poll. So keep in mind, this was a poll where we talked about 600 people to try to gauge the broader opinion of the entire region. But there's probably somebody else on the call here who can address the broader community engagement work that is happening, where the kinds of topics you're bringing up are core to those conversations.
Okay, and then there was a second part to that question, not to that one, but something rubbed me a little bit the wrong way too about the question around safety, public safety or safety in the corridor. Now, how was that question tabled? I mean, in terms of how people, that they felt safe in that sector of the I-5. Can you tell me a little bit more how you arrived to that stuff?
We could, if you want to, actually, if we could go back to that question, it was focused on traffic safety. So let's go back to how that was phrased.
I'm just looking to see which slide it was.
Yeah. It was one with the, find it as well. So the question was, how safe do you feel when driving on I-5 to travel through the Rose Quarter? And then after, additional information about the proposed changes, once these improvements are made, after we talked about auxiliary lanes and shoulders, please indicate how safe you would feel when driving on I-5 to travel through the Rose Quarter area.
You don't think that's a little broad? I mean, do you think it puts people in the context of thinking about traffic?
That was the goal of that question, yes, to gauge,
Okay.
For a project that's focused on making improvements to congestion and safety on the freeway, we wanted to gauge if folks felt that these improvements would go towards an improved sense of safety.
Okay, in regards to traffic.
Correct.
Okay, that's all. That's all I had to ask. But if you could answer that first part of the question, I'd appreciate it.
I think, Mr. Washington, in regards to what I believe I hear you asking, some of those will be conversations that I believe we'll begin to have in our collaborative work with the city and with ABT in regards to placemaking and what opportunities may look like in regards to further development in the area on the caps and around the caps. And I believe even Mr. Modica has brought it up several times, what safety, as far as your personal safety and the feelings of personal safety in an area that has been extremely gentrified and what that means for communities of color. So I think those are some further conversations that we'll be having as we move into those collaborative spaces with our partners at the city and with ABT. Dr. Richard, I see your hand.
Thank you so much, my great friend. Mr. Washington, thank you for that question around safety. My only concern about a futuristic question of whether or not those who were polled will feel safe once the changes are made. It's hard to gauge that because now my question is, how did we gauge the knowledge of those being polled about their understanding of the proposed changes to the I-5 area with respect to them feeling safe? So I think it's kind of a misnomer, if you will, to ask the question, because I don't know how knowledgeable those who were polled are about bridges and changes to bridges to even answer a question about futuristic safety. So that draws a big concern for me.
Right, and for me, to support that is that when it's stated the I-5 corridor in the Rose Quarter segment. Now, I could see if it was a broader question that would just say, in general, how do you feel about safety on the highway or something like that? But when you narrowed it down to a specific category, a specific area, I don't necessarily feel comfortable in that question being not unpacked a little bit more.
No, that's helpful feedback. I think one thing to keep in mind is we are trying to gauge folks' opinion. So we really are trying to understand their gut reaction. I think it would have been interesting had we found out that, vast majority of people feel like it's a very safe place to drive on that freeway. But we're making safety improvements. So that would help us understand, are folks less concerned about safety? And we should really focus more on how we talk about the congestion side of things and the improvements that will happen there. But we do see that, there is, while 61% of folks feel safe driving in the Rose Quarter area, we have got a third of folks who don't feel safe driving through that area. So that's helpful for us to know that is an area of concern for about a third of our community. So the safety improvements that are part of the project will have a positive impact.
Great, thanks, Amy. Bryson, I see your hand, and then Mr. Davis.
Yeah, so I had a little bit of a concern when you asked the question about which components of the project people were most interested in. One of the issues is with the various components of the project, they'd appeal to different groups. Like for instance, the highway covers is a stronger benefit for people who live in the local area. Whereas, something like the auxiliary lanes is a much bigger benefit to people who don't live in the area, who drive through the area. And I think the respondents to these surveys were mostly people who interacted with the neighborhood by driving through it in cars. And I guess I'm kind of wondering, I'm a little concerned that the context of how these all connect might get a little bit lost if we've got questions that kind of compare values for different groups when we're only looking at one of those or a majority of one of those groups, if that makes sense.
No, that's a really good observation. So on the back end of a poll, we have something that's called Crosstabs, where we're able to look into, what's the split on that question, based on gender, based on household income, based on which county, based on how you use the space. Actually, I was able to pull it up really quickly. I'm not able to go every single line by line here, but it is looking like auxiliary lanes was the top choice across demographic groups. So to your point about car, non-car, bike, and public transit, and pedestrian, it actually was still the top choice across all 5 of those groups. It was tied for pedestrians with new bike and pedestrian facilities, but just as many pedestrians chose auxiliary lanes as did chose the new bike and pedestrian paths.
Thank you, Amy. Mr. Edwards?
Yes, thank you. I don't mean to beat this, but I think in listening to Mr. Washington and his concerns, I guess my question is, how did you preface that particular question regarding safety driving through there? Because I think it all depends on the time of day. It all depends on where you're going. If you're traveling north through that area, you've got an on-ramp coming from the east, and then you're trying to get off and go on the Fremont Bridge heading west. If you're traveling south, You could have be trying to get off on the Rose Quarter, and you've got traffic coming off the Fremont Bridge from the west. So those are huge challenges depending on the time of day. And so that would have to go into that question as well. And when you're talking about safety, because if it's, if it's 8 o'clock in the evening, it's certainly different than it is from 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And certainly depending on which direction you're going. So all that I think comes into play in that question. And so that can be a little bit misleading.
Thank you for your comment, Mr. Edwards. Any other questions or comments in regards to the poll information? I will make.
Yeah, I got one last one, Erica.
Thank you.
It's just odd thinking, why would a pedestrian be concerned about an auxiliary lane?
So we did ask folks, how do you primarily use the space? But I think we know that somebody who's a pedestrian today may be a driver or passenger in a car tomorrow, and a driver or passenger in a car today might be on public transit tomorrow. So I think even though somebody's primary use may be one, identified as one, they may use any or all of those modes of transportation depending on the day and the need.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I will make sure that you all have the link to the full information. If you'd like to ask additional questions or give comments, please make sure you can send those to me. I'll make sure to send them over to the rest of the team. We appreciate you diving deep into those issues and helping us to address all of these really, really important areas. With that, Amy, thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
We are going to move forward into our conversation. This piece, we're asking you to dig into some information that we've already previously shared. I'm going to be turning it over to my colleagues from the urban design team to walk us through the design survey results, and we will make some recommendations today.
Excellent. Thank you, Erica, and thanks for having us once again. This is an exciting moment for us because we are going to pivot to some decision-making and recommendations that will lead us on a path to getting the work that we've been talking about over the course of the summer and beforehand right into the construction documents. So earlier in the week, and maybe even last week, the survey results, we did, this is our second survey, you'll remember. Survey results should have arrived at your inbox. So you have that as a backup. We will step through it again here together as a cohort and try to drive to 3 or 4 key recommendations. To do that, per usual, we'll switch from slides to our Miro board, which will allow us to look at things a little bit more holistically. So Tiffany, if you would share the Miro board, we can step through this content relatively swiftly, I think. Thank you. Okay, let's start in the top left, which is some of the information. This is another survey. We're just talking about a survey, but this is another survey. Once upon a time, we asked people about the medallions, the tiles around the columns, the patterns on crash barriers. And we brought that back to you with feedback presented like this. And we made some recommendations. We're seeking to do that same step all over again, but with a new set of topics. You will remember, and for some of you who were with us last week at the Design Collaboration Forum, this will be fresh for you, but the topics that we put out into the community over the course of the summer were around walls and bridges. And we'll get into those specifics, but we usually start with some of the basic demographic information about who filled out the survey and when did they fill it out. I think there was an initial tranche of a large group of people filled out the survey the day it went live. And then what we noticed in the pattern of survey results is when the team was out in the community, whether that was at the Vanport Jazz Festival or at the recent 5K run walk for Word is Bond, there's an uptick in input. This is the basic demographic information. In purple is all respondents, and in the golden color is Black, African American, and African respondents. And throughout the survey, you'll see those colors, both of those colors. You can see what the community at large expressed the preference for, and then what that specific community expressed a preference for. And we do this because you asked us to present the information in this way. I don't think we need to dwell on the demographics unless there are some questions. Again, you have this information and can pore through it. We can dive into design, but I will pause. Are there any questions about this? Okay, so let's dive into the first topic. We have two families of questions around walls. We have some general questions around walls, and we have some very specific proposals that we worked with you over the course of the spring. We have some very specific questions about wall 15. Wall 15, and if you could zoom in on that, Tiffany, maybe just the one above it. So wall 15 is the wall that faces the steel bridge and faces to the west. How to get my directions right. It is there today, but it will be relocated and rebuilt. And it's relatively, we say it's relatively conspicuous because you can see it from multiple parts of the city, and it serves in some part a gateway function. So with your advice, we selected wall 15 as a place that we might do something special. And we came up with these 4 ideas in conversation with you. The first idea circled on the left was, and each of these ideas kind of have like 2 parts, right? There's this idea that we might have some Hollywood signage that would be illuminated by night, but that it could be on the hillside as you arrived onto the east side. And then the wall itself could have a treatment. And we have combinations of those. The first one would say historic Albina. And then on the wall itself, and pedestrians can get very close to this wall. On the wall itself would be depictions of historic images and probably interpretive signage and information to learn more about the history of historic Albina, what was here that isn't necessarily in this exact place right now. Another alternative was to say, rather than historic Albina, to just say Albina, as if this were a living place. This is the place now. It's not just historic. And the wall could disappear by trying to plant as much plant material in front of it, have things grow over it, which is kind of the way it works today. That was another alternative. The third one was maybe moving those Hollywood signage, if people thought that was a little gimmicky, moving that signage and lettering down onto the wall itself, but again, using historic. And then a fourth that you, the HAAB members really wanted this in the feedback, or wanted to get community feedback on this one. There was a fourth option where there could be a rotating mural program. The wall is actually rather large, 600 some odd feet. So it doesn't seem like it's fit for a single mural, but maybe there would be a sequence of murals or rotating art pieces. That was important to you to get community feedback. So let's go to what the community said. We think it's not entirely conclusive. There seems to be, if we just look at the voting writ large, it seems like there is a preference for rotating murals that is seconded by a lot of the open-ended comments that you have in your survey packet. People interested in murals, they sort of reiterated their interest in murals. But if you take the 2 options that have historic Albina elements, including the panels of historic photos and information, those come in a close second. And again, we're really trying to look at the Black and African American respondents as a primary community group to which we're paying attention here. So we think it's not conclusive, and we're happy to have a dialogue today about does the HAAB want to make a decision about this, but we have a proposal about how we can keep both options alive. So maybe I'll ask the HAAB right now, do you have a preference? Now that you've seen the survey results, do you have a preference? that you feel confident you want to move forward with. That is one of these choices, or maybe a hybrid of these choices.
I'm not seeing any hands.
The gold is the African American response.
Correct. So here's, if I might, here's what the design team is going to recommend to you. Standing up a rotating mural program is going to take partnership, time. We don't have all those parts and pieces together yet. It has to be done well. It has to be done in perpetuity. Similarly, doing an historic presentation that includes images and text, tells a story in a comprehensive way, and is durable and whatnot, that also will take some time. But in truth, there are two different kinds of content that go onto a wall. So our proposal to you is that the architecture and urban design team develop a framework system that gets attached to the wall, that allows us to put something in the construction documents, get the pricing, advance the technical coordination work, make sure the wall is designed to hold up that content, heavy or light. And we design a framework that allows us to make a decision about what goes in the frames later. And so we can advance the conversation with the artistic. Are we going to stand up a public art program? How would we develop the partnerships to do so? It gives us the chance to get something in the construction documents, get a placeholder into the project, and allow the content and the ideas around content to mature. So we'd be building in a framework, literally a frame. We're going to be learning about the dimensions of that frame, how we're going to build it, and how we're going to attach it. But ultimately, it will allow us, over the long haul too, it would allow the murals to rotate if we elect to go with the mural program. It would allow us to replace segments of the historic story as we wanted to. It provides a long-term flexibility and a short-term flexibility. So that's what we would put forward for you on wall 15, is we would dive into designing a framework that attaches to the wall and allows us to continue together to explore what we're going to put on. Is that amenable to the HAAB?
Can you do both, James? Can you do something on that wall that allows you the flexibility to use historic photos maybe this year, maybe next year you have rotating murals, or maybe you have a combination of murals and historic photos?
Yes.
Is that flexibility available?
Yes, certainly in terms of the technology and how we design the framework. That flexibility, standing up a program to manage that content and a partner to curate that content, that's what's going to take time. So if we can create a flexible infrastructure, that other stuff can come along.
The concern that I have with that is that, there's too many moving parts, because when you talk about public safety as the bigger issue, and we can't even maintain the murals that we have in the district, or the wall pieces or the art pieces without them being vandalized. So that relationship really, to me, is the key, is the insurance of the piece of the framework, and then what's the maintenance part of that framework gonna look like? Okay, so if suppose someone comes in and vandalizes it and tags it, and you put a tag resistant on the face, or whatever you do to be able to prevent that or preserve the piece, is that those things sometimes only last for 3 hits. So if a mural gets tagged 3 times and you got that face on it, that now you got to go back and reface it again. So now you got a gift that keeps on giving. It's a constant payment reality. So I don't know, that usually sometimes creates some fragmentation and some difficulty, because whoever's owning or whoever has the piece to be doing the work on it, they get grumpy or start griping about the fact that they have to keep repairing the piece. So to me, that would be your most important piece.
Yeah, there is no doubt that is a concern. It's actually what drove the range of alternatives that we presented at the start, including let's make the wall disappear, let's grow things over the top of it. There was a strong interest in using this particular wall for content and for identity. So, but you're right, Mr. Washington, and that's what's going to take some time to figure out is who will own it, who will commit to maintaining it in perpetuity, and what will that regime look like?
Absolutely, and I think that what we're looking at today, these decisions are planning to be woven into, if you will, early work packages. And so as we are further developing who the partners would be, what the program would look like, we want to make sure that our construction partners have the basis to build this canvas for what we might develop. And so if I'm understanding James correctly, the recommendation from the A&E team is in regards to creating these frames, if you will, that could hold, as Mr. Edwards discussed, either historic images or murals. And we want to see if it's possible for us to make a decision about that today so that work can move forward, right? Mr. Clark,
Andrew had his hand up.
Yes.
Oh, I like the simpler is better approach on here, and I kind of agree with John that it feels like there's a lot of moving parts for maintenance, getting a program together for people to actually paint the walls, and making sure that that they're maintained over the long term. But just from the sheer logistics of just kind of driving by it, the images, a lush landscape, and maybe a lit up historic albina sign, I think is powerful, and it tells you something in a very quick minute from traveling by it, where you're at, where you're going, and it triggers a thought of history. So, that second, whatever's going on for me, and if we're making a decision, I like the second option right here, and then figuring out what those images are. Maybe those images are rotated over a period of time, in and out, to reflect different aspects of what was happening during the time in historic albina, and you can cover those with stuff that you could wipe off and maintain long term. But the beautification aspect to me is really figuring out how to soften that area and create that landscape, but for that plantings will do. So, I mean, my vote will be for the second one right here.
Thanks, Andrew. I appreciate that. Mr. Edwards, were you planning to chime in again there?
Ditto.
So I want to be clear. I believe we have 7 HAAB members on the line, which would help us move something forward. The recommendation from the A&E team is that there be a frame built that could have either historic images or murals as we further develop what this program is going to be, what maintenance, who our partners might be, et cetera, to help maintain that program. So I think there's that piece. And then, James, I don't know if I'm moving too far ahead of you. And then that question is the historic albina versus albina.
You're great. I think we can acknowledge the preference for option 2 that's expressed tonight. We hear you, and that is an absolute possibility going forward. The frames that would hold that content is what we don't know which photo to use. We can't tell a contractor to go put that photo there. That's what's going to take us some time. But if we can tell the contractor to build the frame to receive the photograph, it will be more than a photograph. It would be probably acid etched on steel. That's what we need tonight, is like, you agree that the idea of placing content and putting frames here for future content is the right idea. And then we can talk about, is this albina or is this historic albina? And
okay, let's start with the first idea, James. So while I have, because I know we're going to lose some folks as there's other meetings this evening, I'm just going to quickly go around. I've heard from Mr. Clark and Mr. Edwards. If Bryson, are you amenable to that recommendation? in regards to creating those frames for content?
Yes, I'm amenable to the frames.
Indeed.
I think it gives us a chance to think about what the best route going forward is going to be in terms of maintenance and stuff. I'm a little bit less concerned about long-term damage issues given the proximity of this to the Moda Center and people's long-term stake in this particular spot looking good than I might other places. But yeah, I do think it's still something we should keep in mind.
Great, thank you. Andrew Campbell. Maybe he had to step away. Dr. Amato.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, I'm asking the question of the group. Are you amenable to the recommendation from the design group that the framework be created, that we can make the decision going forward in regards to whether they're historic or murals or whether that is rotating? Your thought on that?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate that. Thank you. Srinivasa, are you still with us? I know she was having some connection issues and was texting.
Let's see here.
Mr. Washington?
You know, I'm sort of torn, actually, between the two of them. I am in support of a much more stable framework with this. I mean, because after all, it's a highway. It's just something that's visual that's going to be, and all those other moving parts with murals and all that. The only thing that excites me about that is there's an opportunity to pull together to enroll other businesses and outside entities that, other than the highway framework or a construction framework, that will allow others to be enrolled in the process. And then, of course, to keep that ongoing aspect, we show some stable contributions to some organization that does that kind of rotating art or whatever the case might be. So that part I'm kind of excited about, but I'm also disheartened by the fact that we talk about public safety in every framework or every committee and everything that's going on today, you know, defund the police, whatever the case is. So tagging has gotten so far out of hand in our district or around that area that, you know, to me, it's just a no-brainer. I mean, I'm inviting trouble by doing what I'm doing. I mean, because it's not to say even the stable structure is going to be altered some kind of way through some kind of property damage and those types of things. So I would just like to keep it simple, minimize that reality. And but like I said, at being an artist myself, you know, at the sake of losing that opportunity to enroll other things, kind of disheartening a little bit, but that's just the way it is, I guess. So
Okay.
I'm going with number 2.
I understand. Okay, so you are in favor of the design team having the framework so that we can make the decision as to whether or not it's historic photos or murals. That's a
Correct.
yes? Okay,
Yes.
Thank you so much. Srinivasa, I see that you were able to join us, and I got Andrew Campbell's yes as well.
Yes, I was able to join. However, I did not hear the context for the question. I joined during the responsive comment.
No worries at all. So the in light of the poll results, the A&E team is recommending that there be a building of a frame, if you will, so that historic images or murals could be decided upon. So the images, we won't know what they are currently, right? We'll have time to work through that, develop partnerships, whatever those arts programs might be. So what we're asking the HAAB tonight is, are they amenable to that framing, that framework, creating frames for those images to be created along wall 15?
Got you. Okay. Well, first, I just wanted to say a shout out to Word is Bond for the awesome walking event, because I feel like it was by far the best opportunity for me to really see within context where these pieces are, talk about it with other community members. So I just wanted to say that because it's awesome to visualize this and to really know and have recently been at that spot. So I am in favor of that. I think it's a cool idea. I do have some concerns about, graffiti and tagging. It is really high in the city. So I have some concerns about that, but I don't think that this is necessarily going to be prevented from framing or lack of framing. So, but I think the framing and the ability to rotate the artwork within that, whether it's historical or current, is a great idea.
Awesome, thank you. I believe we have, James, a decision for your team to move forward in incorporating that. And we can move to the conversation in regards to the wording. I think it is really important on this wall in particular. So our next question to you is historic albina as representation of what was, and the history lesson, if you will, the engagement of folks who might be, it's more than cars, it's going to be passerbyers, folks who are walking and able to traverse this area, versus just saying albina, and whether or not that pays homage to the historical, but also refers to how albina is continuing to live. So not just historic, representing the past and the future. So I'd love to get HAAB members' input on their preference in regards to the signage above saying historic albina versus just albina. Mr. Edwards, I'll start with you.
Thank you. I'm kind of have mixed feelings about it, but I like the historic albina. That I think references the fact that we've been here for a while rather than just the albina, which it speaks to the present. I think the historic albina talks about the fact that, we've been here and we're still here. So I would lean toward the historic albina.
Thank you so much. I see Andrew Campbell also is leaning towards historic. Mr. Clark.
It's a historic area. There's a lot of history, and even within historic districts or neighborhoods, the present is still there. So, but I think that it's more powerful for it to be named historic albina rather than albina.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I see Bryson also favors historic albina. Dr. Amato, do you have a comment there?
I do. I've been toying with this for a while because I can see the value in both. The present is just kind of like, I saw Woman King this weekend and, it just kind of established that, we're here and we've been here. We're not necessarily starting over, but then the historic captures and embodies everything that we know that has happened in the area. So I like them both. My vote would be for both. I mean, I care, but I'm okay with going with the majority on this one. But I see power in both is my only position.
Indeed. I appreciate that. Great insight. Srinivasa, your thoughts there?
Yes, I'm glad that Dr. Amato went first because I feel similarly. I understand the value of and the meaning and why we would use the word historic. I like calling to attention that there is a legacy of a history there, but I also feel like there is a connotation or assumption of historic that it's old or that it's past only and not present. So I think if there was a way to intermix both throughout the area where there are certain places, maybe places that we want to be sure to recognize key history, we add that term historic, but then also adding albina, because when I think about young generations and that future generations think about how they use the space. I don't want them to only think back about the past. And right now we're doing a lot of thinking about the future of what this could be as well. So if there's a way to incorporate both, where the history is honored, but it doesn't fully put us in a place of nostalgia without future forward thinking, I would be a fan of a combination of both.
That's so great. And I failed, maybe I should have led with, remember, we have already come to you and to the broader community in regards to the pillars, if you will, and the medallions will only say Albina. So there will be that opportunity as well as other placemaking opportunities throughout the Rose Quarter project where we could have that mix. So specifically in regards to this wall, maybe this is the one place, or we'll talk about the bridges as well. But I love that idea. And there is several other opportunities for there to be that newness, freshness, and forward thinking in regards to just saying Albina. So thank you for those comments. Mr. Washington, your thoughts?
Yeah, she just preached. She told you exactly what I was thinking. I can ditto
send
that.
her an offering? Come on.
Yeah, no, I just think that it's spot on. The historic aspect is a real good aspect of it, but
Sure.
What does that talk about the future? And how does that, invite the younger generation into continuing to build and expound upon what we laid down as a foundation? So I'm indifferent, but so that's where I'm going to stay. I'm indifferent to that right about now. Historic, new, not, it doesn't matter to me. Either way, it's going to be fine.
So I will say, James, based on HAAB members that we have here tonight for Wall 15, that we are with historic Albina, and we'll have our medallions and other areas where we can work to infuse that future thinking so we can move on to the next area.
If I could just make one comment, I think that kind of sums this up. To me, historic Albina is like Sankofa. You take the best from the past, but you're still going forward.
I love that. Thank you so much.
All righty.
Well, let's keep moving. I think this next one might be a little bit easier. I appreciate, Erica, your summary there, historic Albina and the frames. We also asked the community and you before we went out to the broader community, we asked the community about other walls. We're going to drive into specifics going forward, but there was too much information, so we simplified it and asked them questions about 4 different wall patterns. Maybe Tiffany, you can show just briefly the 4 wall patterns, or 5 I think we went out with. Yep, so there they are, just different kinds of patterns, incorporating some of the aesthetic decisions you'd made before on the crash barrier, trying to stitch those into more of the elements of the project. And this, unlike Wall 15, this is where the feedback is pretty resounding. A preference for the one that's circled here, and that's for all respondents and African American Black respondents. There's a preference for the incorporation of the Adinkra symbol. So a couple of weeks ago, we had, and we would ask that the HAAB ratify that decision and move forward with the Adinkra. But before we take that action, we can't use every one of the Adinkra symbols, and I think there are many that are available to us. But a subset of the HAAB in a previous collaboration forum selected the 5 here that were marked in red. We think 5 is a reasonable number to deploy across the project. You'll see in a moment an example of where we might use that. We do want a decision. We need to instruct the contractor or a collaborator like an artist to design a specific Adinkra symbol to put on specific locations on specific walls. So we do need to drive into some specificity. The working group of the HAAB that attended the collaboration forum selected these 5 out of the whole library of Adinkra symbols. And so we're kind of looking for what should be easy, a ratification that yes, let's move forward with Adinkra plus this crowning pattern and a base pattern. The community responded to it. You actually, as the HAAB, asked for that option to be added. So it seems like we're moving in the right direction. But we also need a decision on the specific 5 to include. and your colleagues and peers have selected these 5 for your consideration.
So I would say, again, I want to reiterate, it was the HAAB's recommendation to move this option to the broader public forward. The broader public agreed with you. And so I think with this, those HAAB members that are on with us right now, if I could get your confirmation that we are moving forward in regards to the other walls and with utilizing Adinkra symbols. And I don't have to necessarily call on all of you, but again, based on that input, the HAAB members that are on the line, are we in agreement with moving forward with the other walls, having a consistent pattern of a chosen set of Adinkra symbols? I see a yes from Mr. Washington.
Yep, for me.
A yes from Bryson. Dr. Amato, Srinivasa. Okay, I see a support from Srinivasa as well.
Yes, for me.
Thank you, Dr. Amato. I have both Andrews, Mr. Campbell and Mr. Clark. Yes, I see a thumbs up from Mr. Clark. It is with that, James, we are moving forward and ratifying that decision. Tiffany, if you will maybe enlarge those particular symbols. Again, I will reiterate what James stressed. In a previous working session, we went through several. HAAB members made recommendations on the 5 that you see marked here in red. And I am asking those who are on the line if there are objections to those 5, as we want to not have an overwhelming amount of Adinkra symbols throughout the project. Any thoughts, comments, concerns? Are we in agreement with those 5 that we worked through together as a group? We have Sankofa. And I don't want to butcher all of the pronunciations. The symbol of what Mr. Edwards spoke about earlier of looking back and looking forward, a symbol of unity and community, and a symbol of unity and diversity and giving common destiny, and another that is a symbol of strength in mind, body, and soul, in wisdom and in learning, and then a symbol of affluence, power, abundance, and togetherness. I think those are all very strong, and wondering if we have agreement from those HAAB members on the line in regards to moving forward with those 5 particular Adinkra symbols. Are there thoughts, comments, input? From HAAB members?
So forgive me if you cover this. You're going to move forward with all 5 of these in some way, shape, or form throughout the placemaking.
Correct. And maybe now's the time where we could sort of jump, Tiffany, if you would jump out of this and look at, well, let's go look at a specific wall. We've been trying to get into the details and drive into the details. Maybe go to the rightmost drawing. We're going from the abstract here into the very specific. This is the wall, and you can see, maybe keep zooming into the left-hand side. We're just beginning the composition of where would they go? What's their relative scale in the scale of the wall? That's what we're diving in now. We'll bring that back to you, but we need to know that I think we've got the decision that this is the basic aesthetic choice. Then we can't have an infinite number of Adinkra because each one of them has to be carved and then reversed and then cast into concrete. So we need a limited subset that we're using on the project. And there 5 seems like a reasonable number. And we had this discussion with a previous working group.
They're creating casts for these, right? Stencils, right?
Correct.
Each of these would be a stencil that they would stencil into the concrete.
Correct.
Okay.
I see Dr. Amato is in favor, as well as Srinivasa. Comments from the gentleman, Mr. Washington, Mr. Clark?
You said
I
a
like
lot of
those
names
5.
there. Yeah.
I'm in favor of those 5.
Too.
Bryson
too.
is in favor as well.
Yes, I am also.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. Mr. Campbell, Mr. Clark. Thank you, Mr. Washington. I see you.
Oh, I thought yes.
Perfect. I appreciate that. James, I think we have a yes, and I see a agreement from Mr. Campbell as well. So I believe we have ratification of general direction, pattern of utilizing ADINCRA symbols, and the 5 as identified by our work session with the HAAB.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, now we're going to switch from walls to bridges. And again, I think this will be familiar to you all. We were asking the community about the style of letter, and this isn't as resounding a preference. Maybe you could zoom in even further, Tiffany. But the design team likes this particular selection. Some of the other ideas can get a little bit unwieldy. This idea, we think, the one that seems to be the preference of all respondents in the Black community, we like it because we think it's going to work well in the day and the night. So think of this as the style of these are the letters that will be on the bridge over Russell Street and other locations. So this is, hopefully you will concur. We have a lot of work to do. We know that. We have a lot of work to do to show you what it looks like when you put these specific letters on these specific bridges. We've started that. But we'd like to move it in this direction and would like you to ratify this decision as well.
So I'd love to be able to just highlight to you all again, a majority of the Black and African-American African community also agreed with the design team, as well as the broader community in regards to kind of a raised lettering with the lighting behind. Dr. Amato is in favor. Are there others who would concur?
I'm way in favor of the backlit letters. I think it's probably far and away the best option of the 3.
Yes, I appreciate that. Srinivasa is also in favor.
Great.
Mr. Campbell, Mr. Washington, and Mr. Clark. I see Mr. Washington is also in favor of that, as well as Mr. Campbell. Thank you. And I think I have a check mark, yes, for Mr. Clark. So yes, James, we are moving forward with the community's recommendation as well as the design team in regards to the backlit letters.
That's great. So now maybe Tiffany, you can move to the right and zoom out. So we asked this question about what would we say. So now we know the style of the lettering, and we will come back to you, I promise, with details, color choices, cursive styles, text. There's lots of details that we can get into together once we've made this first decision. But when we asked the community what they wanted to say on the bridge, there was a consistent and resounding support for the construct of historic Albina and then the street name. And that's, you can zoom into any one of these, whether we're at Multnomah, Holiday, Russell, the preference by all correspondents and Black, African-American, and African respondents, if they're all the same. The construct that was selected. And we did give them a write-in option, and there were some write-in options that you can see and you have seen in your packet, but the resounding majority is around historic Albina plus the street name. So here again, this is a preference for historic Albina, and we have historic Albina at wall 15, and we have the medallions and maybe many other elements that will say Albina. And if the team, the HAAB, is amenable to that kind of flexibility in verbal and written construct, we can accept this recommendation and move forward with some more minute workings on how big are the letters and things like that.
And again, in background, I want to share before we go into this discussion and decision that we've had conversations in regards to how there are other places we have relationship with Albina Vision Trust. We are building relationship with the Soul District. There are other projects, placemaking within this corridor that we want to be collaborative with. Today's focus is specifically on these particular bridges and whether we are ratifying the decision in regards to those backlit letters on the bridges for this project saying Historic Albina plus the name of the street, Historic Albina Russell, Historic Albina Multnomah, etc. So, Mr. Washington, I see your hand. Mr. Washington, are you there? While he's getting situated, are there thoughts and approval, recommendations for ratifying, for moving forward with the majority of respondents' thoughts?
Okay, Erica, I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out something on the.
No worries.
Yeah, I appreciate it, but and I do appreciate you saying that, Erica. So I'm just gonna go roll along with it. But I do think some of these intersections need to be addressed. And so as we move forward, we go, because if there's some borderlining assets that we have that are moving from the Albina district into other neighboring areas, I do believe that some kudos or some kind of verbiage or something in relationship to Albina should be stated. And that's about as simple as I can make it.
Indeed. I agree with that. Collaborative placemaking and recognition of all of the contributions to the corridor. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
Bryson, I believe that you had, thank you, Mr. Washington. Bryson, you unmuted.
Yeah, no, so I like this, and I would say, because we talked earlier about historic Albina versus Albina, I think since we're doing this in conjunction with street names, here, especially historic, is probably going to be better, so that there's a little bit less confusion.
Great, thank you for that input. I appreciate that. Dr. Amato, I saw Sprina Vasa's yes in the chat.
Yes, I can go with yes here. I'm kind of dancing in between, like what I mentioned before, the historic versus the old versus the new, and the combination of the two and how that's presented and more or less how it's perceived. So I'm okay. I'm not landing hard on either one.
Thank you for that. Mr. Campbell, Mr. Clark.
I agree with Sprina.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I also agree as well. I like the consistency within the language.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate your feedback.
Well, we'll also, there'll be a lot of new destinations, new places created, a lot of historic places, a lot of important places. And there are districts that have wayfinding and a lot of, like I'll say branded, but there's signage that's included throughout the district that helps you go to where you want to go. And there's lots of opportunity for us to sort of identify places, name places, and guide people to those places. That isn't at the scale of the bridge. It's down where you can actually read it and use it. Okay, I want to give you a gander of what we'll be coming back with on this. Tiffany, if you could slide over, maybe zoom into some of the nighttime views. Ultimately, you can see all of the iterations. We're not going to overwhelm you with all of the iterations that we've started to explore. Now that you've made a choice about the backlit lettering, we're going to get into some architectural detail. But we did want to just sort of zoom into the nighttime ones. I think are really revealing. We think there's a construct here where historic Albina, we can double stack it in a particular color that will glow at night. And then the street name could be a larger element. But we promise to come back. You can see one on the left where we weren't quite sure if we would just do, these are all just us exploring before you've made decisions. So we'll come back with more options like this. And we can get as far down into the weeds as you want in terms of color and things like that. But this is where we stand right now. This is exciting and good. Now I have one walk-on item, if you'll let me, Erica. So Once upon a time, we made a decision about putting tile around the columns, and we've been advancing our design, and we have a question for you. It's a super detailed question, but it's important because we ultimately have to get this into the details. So over on the left, Tiffany, there's we've drawn out each of the radiuses of each of the columns on the project, and we explored it with 2 different tile sizes. And I want a snap reaction on this. The one on the top, these are the exact same patterns. They're accomplished in different tile sizes. So the one on the top is a 4x4 tile, and the one on the bottom is a 2x2 tile. Same colors, same pattern, but rendered with a different scale of tile. And I want to know which one you think is the best, which one you like the most, because ultimately we've got to draw it. Now, does it have to be absolute? No. If you want to think about it more, we can. But I thought this is the kind of thing where we could have some sort of like a snap reaction. Sometimes it is the best. So it's a bit of a walk-on item, but we'd love your feedback on this. It's a decision you've already made. And as we get into the details, you can see how different they are, just as something so small as the tile size.
Any quick reaction? Srinivasa prefers the larger tile. Dr. Amato, were you going to chime in?
I'm just confirming that you said that they're the same design.
Yeah.
They look visually different. So I was just wanted to make sure I'm okay. I do like the larger tile then.
Thank you. Did I hear someone unmute? Mr. Clark, Mr. Washington, Bryson also has preference for the larger tile.
Larger.
Thank you, Mr. Washington. And Mr. Campbell also prefers the larger tile.
Excellent. So this level of specificity is where we're headed. And I expect that the time that we spend on these things may be more limited, because we'll be down in these very, very specific, the big sort of stuff takes some time. Some of these smaller, more detailed and persnickety decisions can go a little bit more swiftly. So thank you for having us. It's always a pleasure working with you. I think we got everything that we needed to keep moving your content into the project. Thank you.
James and team, thank you so much for that work. We are just a hair behind our schedule, and in order to give HAAB members adequate time to dive into and see our design equity framework and give feedback, we are going to postpone that conversation today. And Monica, thank you for being flexible. I believe that the work we've done today is really important as we're moving ahead with early work packages. So thank you, HAAB members, all of your responses. We hear you, and we're going to be working with the team to make sure that your very, very important and valued feedback is incorporated. Ms. Natalie, if you would share the slides again for me, I would appreciate it. So moving forward, just a couple of notes for you all. I will be socializing with you a potential letter of support for the Reconnecting Communities grant. We are on a very, very tight time frame. The team has been working diligently, the Rose Quarter team, as well as the City of Portland and AVT, to develop what is I believe, a very strong and important grant. So please be looking out for that letter. We would love to include a letter of support for just for HAAB and COAC. And this letter of support would be in support of not only the construction grant, but the planning grant that the city and AVT will be applying for in relationship to this collaborative effort on the project. We will also be updating you in regards to the supplemental EA public comment period so that you all can distribute to your networks and folks can chime in regards to that. As we get more information from the CMGC and our partners in the COAC, we will be updating you in regards to additional changes or number updates in the diversity and subcontracting plan. So as we look forward to this Reconnecting Communities grant, we are hoping to be able to share with you a very positive decision as we anticipate that there's a decision coming in the spring of 2023. And with your diligent work this evening, our team is working hard to make sure that your preferences and thoughts and ratifications tonight are worked into early work packages for design elements that honor our beloved Albina community. I would also like to draw to your attention, again, please avail yourself to the information that was emailed to you. The public comments are shared in regards to additional opportunities to serve the community. Please avail yourself and your networks to that. Also, there is an event on this Saturday, I believe, in regards to the Albina 1 project that many of you had an opportunity to be in the meeting with AVT in regards to. I'll be sharing that information out with you. I believe it's an awesome opportunity for us to continue in the spirit of collaboration. If there are no further comments, Dr. Holt, if you would close us out, I would appreciate you.
What a great conversation and great dialogue. Your thoughtfulness is always significantly valued. This is such nuanced work and powerful that your voices are able to be involved kind of in the grassroots, getting down to finite details as you heard described, but you're so much more than that. And so as we are going forward, we are working to and making sure that this process is expanded upon, that we continue to be transparent, accountable, and that your voice will continue to be a voice throughout the project. We appreciate the investment and appreciate the time. There's an old phraseology, not terribly too old, but it's a current colloquialism, and that is teamwork makes the dream work. Well, there are two things about that. Work. And work is significant. It's a significant part. It takes part of your time. It takes your investment. It takes your willingness to volunteer. It takes you into the evening. It's inconvenient. It pulls on you. But it also means that you're willing to be a team and to think together and process together, even when you don't see it the same way. So I appreciate your availability, and I appreciate being a part of this process to do business differently. If you just be kind enough to continue to share what's happening, we are reliant upon you to take this narrative and to make it loud and noisy. There are too many people who still don't know about this great work and this great opportunity on so many levels. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your influence. Thank you for your voice and your leadership and your decision-making and your commitment. And I'm asking you to be a voice in this space. And let's stay accountable to the process. That's our job. That's our work. That's the work of Tri-Excellence, to make sure we're doing what we do with integrity and with character. And with that being said, there are probably about hour and a half of sun left. I think we should go get some.
Have a good night, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us.
Peace.
Bye-bye.
We out. Later on, yeah.
Good night.
Bye, thank you.
Good night. Thank you so much.
Good night.
Good night. Thanks, team.
Great job, Ms. Erica.
Thank you, Ms. Erica. You kept us on track. Thank you.
You are welcome. I wanted to make sure we did the work tonight. Thank you. Thanks, Natalie and everybody, Brea.
Have a great night.